Let me introduce you to a man whose life reads like a quiet revolution. Henry David Thoreau. Picture someone who looked society square in the eye and opted out, not out of spite, but out of clarity. When we say watch this once in your life, we mean observe a rare experiment. A person living deliberately, fully aware that each choice might seem absurd to others but true to his own soul. This isn't a dusty tale from the past. Thoreau's cabin at Walden Pond, built in 1845, was tiny, but his ideas were epic. He dared to step away from industrial boom, from crowds, from social pressure, and yet his rebellion was not about isolation. It was about intimacy with nature, with truth, and with conscience. What follows is not just biography, it's a guide. Thoreau's refusal to follow society's rules, whether about money, war, or conformity, offers timeless insights. So if you've ever felt out of step, out of time, or just exhausted with the way the world goes, this story might offer a spark. 1. Early life and intellectual awakening. Henry David Thoreau was born on July 12, 1817, in Concord, Massachusetts, a small town teeming with budding intellectual activity. From childhood, he felt the rhythms of New England's woods, marshes, and rivers as deeply as any classroom lesson. In the house run by his mother, Cynthia, he absorbed ideas about abolitionism and community that later shaped his convictions. In 1833, he entered Harvard, graduating in 1837. He studied literature, Greek, and philosophy, but it was the library that became his sanctuary. Less a student than a seeker, indifferent to grades but fascinated by ideas. Though he tried teaching at Concord Academy, he quit after just 2 weeks because he refused to discipline children physically, an early sign of his unwillingness to compromise ethics for convention. His early adult years were spent in Concord doing everything from pencil making in his family's factory to tutoring, and forging key friendships with Emerson, Alcott, and Fuller. Ralph Waldo Emerson became his mentor and opened the doors of the Transcendental Club. Encouraged to keep a journal and explore nature, Thoreau began to shape a worldview centered on self-reliance, moral clarity, and social critique. 2. Choosing a life of deliberate simplicity. On July 4, 1845, Thoreau moved into the simple cabin he built near Walden Pond, on land owned by Emerson, for what would become a 2-year experiment in radical simplicity. His goal: strip away non-essentials, live deliberately, and confront life head-on. He remained until September 6, 1847, though the published Walden condenses that time into one symbolic year. Everyday life at Walden was austere yet observant. Thoreau kept meticulous records, from freezing patterns of the pond to the names of plants and birds, identifying them both scientifically and poetically. He gardened a bean patch, built minimal furniture, went on regular walks, and wrote. But simplicity wasn't deprivation. It was focus, driven by philosophical intent. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately. Despite romantic notions of solitude, he interacted often with neighbors, visiting Concord, receiving Emerson, and walking on public lands. Though rejecting mass society, he remained rooted in community. His time in the woods was not escape but confrontation, with technology like the passing railroad, with fashion, and with empty conventions. 3. Walden and the Philosophy of Nonconformity. Published in 1854 after extensive revision, Walden, or Life in the Woods, blends memoir, social critique, philosophy, and environmental observation into a cohesive statement of refusal of materialism, industrial frenzy, and spiritual complacency. It's part manual, part poem, part spiritual 30-day retreat compressed into prose. Thoreau's prose is both precise and poetic. He describes freezing cycles, depths of the pond, species of flora and fauna in scientific detail, while weaving metaphors of human suffocation under industrial capitalism. He critiques the railroad. We do not ride on the railroad, it rides upon us. Each sleeper is a man, argues he, seeing exploited labor beneath technological ease. His central invitation, dwell in the essential. In Walden he writes that a man is rich by how many things he can let alone. That rejection of more, money, fashion, technology, was deliberate nonconformity. It forced readers to reconsider the pace and depth of their own lives. Walden sells modestly at first, but its influence grows, seeding modern minimalism, environmentalism, and thought about what it means to live on purpose. 4. The act of refusal, civil disobedience. In July 1846, Thoreau refused to pay his poll tax to protest slavery and the Mexican-American War, and spent one night in Concord jail, a small act with huge meaning. He held firm to his conscience rather than comply with what he saw as immoral government policy, an early personal rebellion against injustice. That experience spawned his famous essay, first delivered as a lecture in 1848, and published in 1849 as Resistance to Civil Government, later known as Civil Disobedience. He argued that moral law supersedes legal law, majorities don't necessarily hold truth, and individuals must break unjust laws publicly. His motto, that government is best which governs least. His ideas went on to influence global giants, Gandhi in India, Martin Luther King Jr. in America, Tolstoy in Russia. He offered a blueprint for resistance that relies on conscience, discipline, and nonviolence, or at least refusal to cooperate with systems of oppression. 5. Activism and intellectual integrity. Beyond Walden and tax resistance, Thoreau was a fierce abolitionist speaker and writer. In 1854 he delivered an incendiary address titled Slavery in Massachusetts, condemning local complicity in slavery laws. His most controversial defense came in 1859 with his public support of John Brown's armed raid at Harper's Ferry, published as a plea for Captain John Brown, arguing Brown's moral urgency trumped conventional legality. Thoreau also kept voluminous journals, tens of thousands of pages of natural observations and philosophical reflections. After his death, works like Faith in a Seed and Wild Fruits emerged from those notes, showing his deep investment in nature as teacher, science as spiritual practice, not as escape but as communion. He supported his life through modest means, surveying land, occasional lectures, writing essays, and improving the family pencil business. That he did so while maintaining moral consistency, refusing to preach compromise, illustrates how nonconformity can still function within society without succumbing to it. 6. Legacy, a life worth watching. Thoreau died on May 6, 1862, at age 44, far too young, but his ideas continued to grow in influence. Today he's considered one of America's greatest writers, a foundational figure in environmentalism, and a moral beacon for individual resistance to injustice. His writings inspired leaders across the globe, Tolstoy, Gandhi, King, along with generations of environmentalists and minimalist thinkers. His life proved that refusal, to conform, to comply, to consume, can ripple outward in profound ways. But his legacy isn't unblemished. Some critics point out contradictions, a sometimes harsh individualism, a refusal to compromise even on community care, and personal arrogance that complicate the romantic figure he's often cast as. Still, his example remains potent: to live deliberately, to listen to one's conscience, and to refuse societal demands that threaten justice or meaning. 7. Reflection: the value of refusal. Thoreau's refusal was never for the sake of rebellion. It was fueled by values, simplicity, moral clarity, ecological awareness, and spiritual depth. He emerged from society only to return to it with sharper vision, critique grounded in lived experience. What does refusal mean today? It might mean quitting a job that compromises your integrity, or resisting consumer pressure to accumulate. It might mean choosing depth over distraction, values over votes. Thoreau's life shows refusal is not merely oppositional, it's constructive. It builds an inner architecture stronger than outer approval. So yes, it's a life worth watching, to see how one man dared to drop out without quitting the world. He showed that rules exist to be questioned, that comfort is not always right, and that refusal can be the seed of real change. Conclusion: Henry David Thoreau refused to conform to the expectations of wealth, war, or convenience. Instead, he built a life of moral clarity and authentic experience. From Harvard classroom to Walden Woods, from jail cell to global influence, his refusal to follow society's rules was a radical gift. He invites us to examine, what rules are we living by because they're true or because they're easy? And what might happen if we followed the music only we can hear? His life, quiet, thoughtful, uncompromising, is not just biography. It's an invitation to step aside, look closer, and live deliberately. If you watch this once, you may never look at your world the same way again.